All right, guys, I know this is a long one, but try to bear with me till the end. I have a lot of questions that go unanswered in this video. I'm making this post doing the original video because of just how long it ran. I go through this entire video. It's only 12 minutes long. My video is like 37 minutes long, but stick with me and see if you can answer some of these questions that I still have after IMBeggars answering the question of why does God let bad things happen. Here's another video that's supposed to address the problem of evil. This video is titled, Why Does God Let Bad Things Happen? I'm going to accept this as a question in general, but my question more is, why does God provide the catalysts for bad things to happen when he could have chose not to? It seems like he could have chose not to. He could have chose to give humans the proper mutations in their DNA to ward off all cancers or certain types of cancers, but he did not. But it appears that he did give this to elephants and other animals, and I want to know why. But anywho, we're gonna jump right into this video. Subscribe, share the video, comment down below. I can't wait for all the comments. They're fun, they're great. But let's go.
I'm guessing he was in his 20s, and he said, "Why would God allow my 6-year-old sister to die of horrible cancer?" And then he said, "And don't tell me."
So the question here is, why would God allow somebody, it doesn't matter, 6-year-old, whatever, why would God allow somebody to die of cancer? Which is a fair question. Why does God allow somebody to die of cancer? He could simply have taken away the cancer, and he chose not to. So it's a good question. Why did God choose not to take away the cancer? He doesn't have to perform some miracle. He can make it look like a totally natural healing of this cancer, curing of this cancer. No free will has been violated in that scenario, and no, a lot of people say, well, why doesn't God just come down and show himself? And you gotta come to believe in God. For some reason, God can't do that. That would be silly. You have to have faith. You have to believe. You have to trust. Whatever. So there's no violation of that. God's not coming down and performing some miracle for all to see, which he did in the past, but doesn't want to do now for some reason. Take all that aside. So it doesn't violate free will. It doesn't lead people to believe because for whatever reason, God he wants people to come to believe. He doesn't want to violate their free will by making them believe. So it doesn't violate any of those two standards. So I'm curious, why doesn't God put this genetic mutation into humans so we could at least stop dying of cancer? And if, okay, so maybe there are cancers that are caused by actions that you take. We could still get those kind of cancers, right? Because if we smoke cigarettes for 37 years, whatever, you could still die of that cancer. I'm not even asking you to take that kind of cancer away, because you knew the risks, you knew the consequences, you smoked the cigarettes, those are the cards that were dealt to you. So I'm not even saying why doesn't he take away that kind of cancer, but what about the 6-year-old girl in this scenario, or babies who are just born with cancer? He could at least take that away, right? But he chooses not to. So I'm hoping that question gets answered in this video. That was a long tangent, so let's keep going.
Tell me God's just going to make the best of it. He was being honest, and he was devastated and angry, but I could tell he still wanted to believe, and it was causing conflict. Not an easy one to respond to, and probably one of the hardest questions our faith is ever going to face. I think all of us are going to get to the point someday when we're just going to look around and see all the war and disease and poverty and suffering and evil. And we're just going to say, where are you, God?
So I don't necessarily like that, because I'm taking into account the free will argument, like I said before, which is why I focus primarily on things that don't violate free will, like all the stuff on here, murder, which you cannot necessarily violate somebody's free will and still not allow them to murder, just as I'm not allowed to fly. I can't just fly up into the cosmos. I can't just breathe underwater. I can't breathe in outer space. Is that violating my free will because God did not give me the ability to do these things? I argue no. But it's the same thing with murder. Why am I allowed to murder, but I am not allowed to fly? Obviously not in a plane, but I can't just take off and start zipping through the galaxies. Is that a violation of my free will? I don't think so, and neither would be taking away my ability to murder. but let's keep going.
Could you let these things happen? Or maybe, how could you let this thing happen to me? And we're told over and
Again, not necessarily why would you let these things happen, but why do you provide the catalyst for these things to happen? It's not why do you let a volcano erupt and wipe out an entire village. It's why did you create a world where volcanoes are even in existence to wipe out an entire village? Leave the volcanoes out. That it would be a better world without volcanoes.
over how this is some God of love who loves us like we're his children, and he's all good and all powerful and can do all things, and we'll just wonder, then why doesn't he do anything about it?
Yeah.
Why doesn't he intervene?
Yeah.
I wouldn't let these things happen to my children if I had the power to stop it. And we're left with this idea that if there is a God, and that's a very big if, he's either some...
Oh, that's a very big if. I genuinely don't know anything about this channel. Maybe this isn't a Christian channel. I was hoping that he was going to address the problem of evil, but this is a very big if, he says. Maybe I'm wrong. This might not be a Christian channel. I genuinely don't know.
Some cruel and sadistic God looking down on us like that mean child looks down on the worms roasting on the sidewalk.
A cruel and sadistic child. Would God be like the cruel and sadistic child looking down at the worms, like worms frying on the sidewalk? I mean, possibly, right? It's possible. He did create the volcano. He did know in advance the volcano would erupt. He didn't know in advance that the volcano that he created would erupt and completely wipe out an entire village, burning all of the children alive. And it is, for me, it is important to use children in these analogies because by and large, you can't really say, well, you know, they were sinners or they were murderers or thieves. It was a village of thieves. These are children we're talking about. So that's why I do tend to use the children in these analogies. But maybe he is, right? Because he did create all of these things that would cause all of this pain and suffering. And he could have chosen not to. Whether or not he enjoys it, I don't know. Why else would he create the volcano? But I don't know. Maybe not. Let's keep going.
Or else he's a weak God, powerless, impotent, unable to do anything about it even if he chose. Or, probably the worst one of all, we think he's just a cold and heartless God who really doesn't care about you or me or anyone else.
Well, see, I don't agree with this because you're talking necessarily about three different gods. You're talking about the Old Testament Abrahamic God who in the beginning created volcanoes and cancer. And then you're talking about the God of the second God in this example, the one watching down and watching his creations, wouldn't be the God of the New Testament, the Jesus, the love, all that good stuff. And then this God wouldn't be the God of the Old Testament or the New Testament. This is like a deistic God. So I don't know where this is going.
And for some of us, we just lock this up and bury it down and keep jumping through our religious hoops, even though deep beneath the surface, it really bothers us. And for others, it makes us angry, rebellious, even hateful. We'll turn our backs and walk away saying, I don't want anything to do with this God anyway. Either way, faith is lost.
I don't necessarily like that either, because just because God is evil doesn't mean he doesn't exist. If there was any type of evidence that this God existed, I wouldn't worship this God, but I would still believe he exists, right?
The truth is,
I guess my point would be that just because this God's I believe in this God, I know he exists, then I find out this God is evil, I still know he exists. I don't just stop believing he exists and walk away, right?
There really is no good answer to what we call the problem of evil.
What?
Simply because there is no answer, it's an unanswerable question.
What?
Answer to what we call the problem of evil. There really is no good answer to what we call the problem of evil. Simply because there is no answer, it's an unanswerable question.
A little misleading. I thought that this was, Jesus. You can't put a video title up and says, why does God let bad things happen? The problem of evil. It leads one to believe that you're going to provide some type of answer or solution to this problem. But then you just go in and say that there is no answer. So what is the remaining 10 minutes of this video about? All right, let's keep going.
Sure, I could illustrate out in very clever ways what all the greatest minds have said about it, but they knew they were treading into deep waters far beyond our comprehension. And you and I know that all the clever arguments in the world
See,
are...
I don't agree with that statement either. Treading into deep waters far beyond our comprehension? Not necessarily. If you want to make the argument that this God is good, you're treading into waters far beyond your comprehension, because like he said, I don't think there is a good answer for this. But maybe you don't got to tread so deep. Maybe the answer is right there on the surface of the water. Maybe the answer is that this God is evil. I'm putting it out there.
really going to cut it for that family who just buried their 6-year-old, or the woman brutalized, or the millions starving to death every day. Even C.S. Lewis himself, who crafted some of the most convincing...
I guess that's kind of another good one, right? The children who are starving to death. If God were to feed them somehow, would it violate anyone's free will? Would it violate anyone's ability to not believe a God exists? I guess depending on how he did it, right? But he could work his magic and create some type of garden where humans could eat food. That would be nice, right? But all right, let's keep going.
Arguments on the problem of evil, when faced with the loss of the love of his life, wrote, "It all seems like some kind of vile practical joke. And when the need is desperate, we go to God and find the door slammed in our face, and the sound of bolting and double bolts from the inside. And then silence. I'm sure that probably connects somewhere with all of us. But for me, the only satisfactory answer I've ever heard on this question comes from God himself.
Oh.
When asked by some poor soul in the Bible who was really suffering. His name was Job. I'm sure you've heard of him. And there was no other like him on the face of the earth. Faultless.
I heard he has something to do with
upright, innocent. And those are God's words, not mine. And he had everything. A loving family, more wealth and prosperity than any other man in the East, and the love and esteem of all his people. And then one day, he lost everything. His family, his children, his loved ones, dead. His herdsmen, his wealth, his livelihood, destroyed. And he himself was struck with a disease so disgusting that his friends could not even raise their eyes to him, because they couldn't even recognize him. And he would just lay there, in the ashes, scraping himself with the broken shards of his life, wondering, why God?
Wasn't this the story where, if I remember correctly, this was all just one big test to see if you... I'm not going to get... I can't remember. There's so many wacky stories in the Bible.
He said, my tears pour like flowing streams.
Yeah, I think he does. He goes through all of this, but God eventually does reward him, right? For his loyalty.
I'm filled with restlessness until the dawn. My flesh is clothed with worms and scabs. My skin cracks and festers.
If the best answer he's ever heard of, I'm prophesying right now, right? And if the best answer he's ever heard to the problem of evil is that the suffering on this life now either A, makes you a better person later, or B, the suffering on this life now is nothing compared to the eternal glory that you're going to face later on, then these are terrible answers. Because even if true, that still doesn't explain why some people will have wonderful lives, right? They'll have the money, they'll have the wealth, they'll have all the things that Job had, but never lose them, and they will get into heaven. And there's some people who won't be so fortunate. So this still wouldn't explain the babies who never get to experience life at all, right? These are terrible answers. Maybe that's not where he's going. I am making a prophecy right now. We'll see how accurate I am, but those are terrible answers.
My days come to an end with no hope. I shall never see happiness again.
All right, we get it.
And sure, his friends came by with all the clever arguments in the world, but they didn't satisfy him. And that conflict and rebellion grew inside him until finally he lashed out at God and said, how could you let this happen to me? I'm innocent. I did everything right.
Explain yourself.
God's response came through a storm.
Of course it did.
Who is this?
What the fuck are you?
Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Have you commanded the morning since the days began?
So God's a dick, right? If this is his response, I can't recall where this story goes, sure. But God's a dick. He's a dick for that. God, why have you killed my family, ruined my crop? Maybe God, I don't know if God directly did this, but why did you allow my crops to be ruined? Why'd you allow my family to be killed? Why'd you allow this disease to enter me? I'm good, I've done nothing wrong. And he's like, the fuck are you to tell me? Okay, let's see where it goes.
Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Do you have the wisdom to command the entire universe?
Yes.
And the power to operate it?
Mm-hmm.
Who is this who questions without knowledge? He never answered the question. He only answered with a series of unanswerable questions, as if to say, don't worry, I got this. The man could only lay his hand over his mouth and learn to trust in the one who knows. And so will I. Evil is not some question.
Yeah, okay, so this is the answer that he's going with, is us feeble-minded humans. We can't possibly understand what a God has in store for why babies get cancer. You don't understand why this baby would get cancer, or you're not the ruler or creator or the most intelligent being in the universe, are you? So who are you to question why babies would get cancer? Come on. Just let's keep going. Let's keep going. Jeez Louise.
Riddle to be solved. Asking why only leads to, it's something to be overcome.
Something to be overcome? How does a baby who dies of cancer overcome that? They're dead. This is my last video. The last video that I posted was a video about the problem of evil, and I got this kind of response a lot, where people described adversity as evil. But that's not what we're really talking about here. We're not talking about somebody who's down on their luck and they just gotta pick themselves up by the bootstraps and go out and get the 9 to 5 and work hard. We're talking about death. Let's go.
When Jesus came down here and placed himself right in the midst of all our war and disease and suffering and evil, what did he do?
Died.
He didn't just snap his fingers and make it all go away. He didn't yell and scream in anger, and he certainly wasn't afraid. And God didn't even spare his own son from it. He could have. Instead, he bore it. Literally all of it. He suffered it patiently, and he crushed it permanently.
He crushed what?
And he looks at you and me dead in the eyes and says, come on. Now let's do this together.
Whoa, did I miss something?
I'll show you.
What did he crush permanently?
He snapped his fingers and make it all go away.
Make it all go away. All being...
What did he do? Placed himself right in the midst
of all of our
war,
disease,
and
suffering,
evil.
and evil.
What did he do? He didn't just snap his fingers and make it all go away. He didn't yell and scream in anger, and he certainly wasn't afraid. And God didn't even spare his own son from it.
So I'm not going to touch too much on this whole spare his own son thing, because this was all his plan from day 0. God would have known that since the creation to Jesus's death, that this was going to happen. So of course he didn't spare his own son. It's his plan to do the sacrificing, but he said he crushed it? What does that mean?
Instead, he bore it.
Okay.
Literally all of it. He suffered it patiently, and he crushed it permanently.
He crushed what permanently? Because we still have all of those things, very much so. Arguably, maybe not even arguably, probably, definitely, at least arguably, it's worse now, the war, the suffering, or at least it's on a greater scale, right? Because a war of like World War II would be unimaginable, would be of an unimaginable scale compared to a war of that time. But all right, I guess he crushed war permanently.
And he looks at you and me dead in the eyes and says, come on, now let's do this together.
Do what together? It was already crushed permanently. What are you doing together now? IMBeggar. Your videos are very well put together. There's much more work into your videos than there is mine, admittedly. Your narration's better. You have a better voice than I do. Everything about your video is better, except that was really stupid. What do you mean he crushed it permanently? First off, no, he did not, because we still have those things. And then after you say he crushed it permanently, you immediately go on to say, well, let's keep crushing it. Well, you can't keep crushing it because it was crushed permanently, but okay.
I'll show you.
Show you.
He doesn't give us an answer. He gives us himself.
What? There's
a scene from Dostoevsky's book.
He gives us himself. That made no sense. I don't care what you say. You cannot make sense of whatever he just said. So war, death, I forget what he said just a minute ago. The war, the death, the disease, whatever. Jesus bore it, he suffered it, he did it patiently, and then he crushed it permanently. Then he asked people to let's do it together, and then he didn't give us an answer of how. He gave us himself. What he just said. That makes no sense, but let's keep going.
Book, the brothers Karamazov.
Still doesn't touch on why babies are born with cancer, by the way, or why volcanoes erupt and burn babies alive.
That's etched in my brain. In it is the grand
Except for, of course, he did address those two things, right? You're dumb, you're stupid, you cannot possibly understand why a God would do this. Who are you to even question a God? That's basically his answer. Babies are born with cancer? You don't know God. You don't know God's plan. That's true. I don't know God's plan, right? But I would still like the answer of why couldn't he just leave cancer out of his plan? Are you saying cancer is the only way a God, the intelligent, all-powerful creator of the universe, who rules the day and commands the night, or whatever the fuck he just said a little bit ago, right? This God could not have done it in a different way that didn't involve cancer? I don't know. Let's keep going. This is getting really dumb. Very well done video.
Inquisitor, evil incarnate, and he's blaming his prisoner, Christ, for all the evil in the world.
Yeah.
You got it wrong, he accuses. You gave them freedom, but...
I mean, that's a fair accusation. You can make a strong argument that Christ... He said Christ, right? Hold on, I apologize.
You got it wrong. Blaming his prisoner, Christ, for all the evil in the world.
Blaming prisoner of Christ. Okay, so yeah, you can make a strong argument that Christ is responsible for all the evil in the world, right? Because Christ is the Trinity. He is God. He is not God. None of that makes any sense, but let's grant the argument. The Trinity, he is God. So God created all of the things. He's the architect of this world in which all of these things happen. And being the architect, you have ultimate control on what you will and will not allow to take place in your world. These are all things that he allowed and was the direct catalyst for, all the way back from the fall, which is what many Christian apologists claim is responsible for the evils in the world. He created the garden. He created the serpent. He knew the serpent was coming. He knew Adam and Eve would be deceived. He created them anyway, and he created the tree in which they ate from. He put all of this into place, knowing full well beforehand exactly what would happen, instead of creating a world in which this wouldn't have happened. Had he just left the goddamn tree out of the garden, well, we might be in a better off place as we are today. So yeah, you can make the argument.
You got it wrong, he accuses. You gave them freedom, but they're too weak to bear the responsibility of it. Too weak to find salvation. They don't want freedom, they want security. Without it, there'd be no suffering, no war, no hunger, no slavery, no death.
So I know where this is. This is another comment I got a lot too, right? Well, if there wasn't all of the bad things, how would you even be able to know what or enjoy a good thing? You don't even know what a good thing is if you don't have a bad thing. Well, I say, fine. Don't let me experience the good thing. You could still take away the bad thing. I'm fine with that. That's totally fine. But maybe he's saying something different. I don't know. Or a free will argument here.
Because of you, millions are lost.
Mm-hmm.
Because of you, millions will suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Because of you, millions will die.
Billions.
The prisoner's response, and these are his lines, not mine. When the Inquisitor...
That's implied when you say the prisoner's response. That's not your lines.
Ceased speaking, he waited some time for his prisoner to answer him. His silence weighed down upon him. He saw that the prisoner had listened intently all the time, looking gently in his face and evidently not wishing to reply. The old man longed for him to say something, however bitter and terrible.
What the fuck is happening?
But he suddenly approached the old man in silence and softly kissed him on his bloodless, aged lips. That was all his answer. The old man shuddered. His lips moved. He went to the door, opened it, and said to him, "Go. Come no more. Come not at all. Never. Never." And he led him out into the dark alleys of the town. What was Christ's response to evil? No words, no anger, no fear. Just
no love, no words, no anger, no fear, no action, no anything. That's not a good thing. Like, you can't... that's not an appropriate response to just give somebody a kiss when they're asking you why you've allowed all of this evil to take place. Teehee?
What was evil's response? So I don't think the question is, why does God let bad things happen?
Uh-huh.
We can never know the answer to this, but...
That is... No. That is the question. What do you mean? That is the question. It's the title of your video, dude. Like... Okay.
I'm perfectly okay trusting in the one who does. But I think the better question is,
Why do babies get cancer? Trust God. That's why. Trust God. And why they get cancer. Trust God. What is my response? What's my response to babies getting cancer? I don't know.
Response.
It's awful. It's evil. Like what?
How do I respond to all the evil I see? Do I kick and scream, cursing the darkness?
No.
Or do I go out there and light a candle? A fire? How do I respond to the evil that touches my...
How am I supposed to stop a volcano that God put there from erupting and killing people? Granted, maybe you could argue that, hey, maybe don't build your villages so close to volcanoes, and that's fair, right? But you still have the fallout from the ash. You still have all the animals that are going to die from this, right? It's still a net. Volcanoes are a net negative. Why did God put them here?
My friends, my family, my neighbor. Do I blame the entire universe?
No.
Or do
That's
I
not
just
the
show
question.
up and sit there, gently, and bear it with them? How do I respond to the evil that invades my mind?
No, man. There's a fallacy for this where you try to flip it around on the other person. Like, why does God allow evil? Well, why do you allow evil? Like, all right, that doesn't answer the question. I'm entirely bored with this video.
Mind and tortures my soul. Do I fight to overcome the problem of evil? Or is the problem of evil me?
Wow.
Terrible things are going to happen. We can't control that. But we can choose how we respond to it.
Sure.
Do I let it overcome me? Or do I overcome it?
So the entire last part of this video from right here, what's my response? 10 minutes on, it completely takes God out of this equation. Completely, he's coming from this now from a secular standpoint. Like, what do you do about the bad that you see in the world? And maybe I'll agree with the entire rest of this video, but it in no way addresses this question. Yeah.
Do I respond just with more evil or my love in the midst of the evil?
Okay.
It's one of the hardest things we'll ever do. And I don't...
It seems to be the case that if God created this world in which evil was in existence and he could have created a world without it, it seems like if you are going against the very thing that he was the architect, the catalyst for coming into this world, kind of seems like you're fighting against God's will. If God genuinely did not want somebody to die, it wasn't his time, right? We hear that all the time. It was just his time. Well, it wasn't this person's time. Would God intervene? He's done it many times in the past. So if you're actively fighting against that volcano, working to put a big cork in it or something, I don't know how fucking volcanoes work, but you're working to stop this volcano from erupting, kind of seems like you're smacking God in the face, going against his plan. He likes the evil. I'm a little bit more convinced that he likes the evil after watching this.
Let's think we can do it alone. But that's okay. Because we have a very powerful friend who's already gotten through exactly what it is you're going through.
But he's not doing anything. That's the whole problem. That's the whole point of all of this. We don't have a very powerful friend who's in our corner fighting on our side. This whole video was about why God and Jesus and all these people are not doing anything. Because you don't understand God. You saw the video. You were there with me. He's not doing anything. Jesus isn't doing anything. Fuck.
And he looks at you gently with all the love and strength in the universe and says, okay, come on. Now let's do this together.
The baby is already dead. It has already died of cancer. We're not talking about a problem here where you're down on your luck. We're talking about people who have already died. We're talking about natural disasters. God being the catalyst of said natural disasters, creating a world in which he did not have to have natural disasters, but adding them in anyway. This guy's not addressing the problem of evil. He's addressing the problem of hardships. Because okay, that tangent done. I'm going on to whatever's going on the screen here. If this is how it worked, okay, come on, let's do this together. You got some guy down here and he's lifting up the cross, which I'm assuming is meant to represent the burdens of his life. And then you have this figure of Jesus who's right there beside him, lifting him up. then why, when people suffer catastrophic events in their lives, do sometimes they just kill themselves because the pain is too unbearable? Where was Jesus then? These are, and mind you, Christians do this. People who believed in God. They loved God so much. They went to church every Sunday. They followed the Gospels to the best that they could. We're all sinners, right? And then they have some catastrophic, tragic event happen in their lives, and they just can't bear it any longer. Was Jesus there assisting in the suicide? That's probably a banned word on YouTube, huh? Where was Jesus in that picture? The point is that even if what he's saying right now is true and someone come along and says, okay, come now, let's do this together. Now I'm going to need you to explain why he doesn't do it for everybody. You know, let's go. I was hoping this video would address questions that I have, but again, well, in especially sense because the video starts off with one of my very questions that I would really like an answer to. Well, anyway, okay, we're capping this video off. I wanted to keep this under 20 minutes. We're at 35, so I'm capping it off. This video answers nothing, posits nothing new. Beautifully done. Good job on the video itself, but overall, I got very bored at the end. Nothing was answered, nothing was addressed. At least he was honest that there really is no answer to this problem. Or was he? Because maybe the answer actually is God is just evil.